Everyone in the small town thought of him as invisible. He moved quietly through the cobblestone streets, his shoes scuffed, coat worn and faded, shoulders hunched under the weight of other people's laughter. His name was Felix. Nobody expected anything from him. Nobody noticed him. He passed the grand town square, where children ran and played, their voices loud, their games full of life. Felix stopped for a moment, watching them, a faint ache in his chest. They didn't see him. They never had. He carried with him a secret, a battered old piano, wheeled slowly behind him on a small cart, scraped across the stones with every step. The instrument was nearly as worn as he was, its keys chipped, its finish faded, but it held something more valuable than appearances, a voice. A voice that Felix had nurtured in secret, a voice that had grown with him through nights spent alone, practicing in the attic of his tiny home while the world slept. That evening, the town announced its annual talent showcase. Posters were plastered everywhere. Show your gift. Perform for the town. Children and teenagers prepared for weeks, some with instructors, some with instruments, some with confident voices. The town expected elegance, perfection, applause. And when Felix decided to enter, most people just shook their heads. "That scrawny boy with that ugly old piano," they whispered. "He'll be humiliated." But Felix didn't care. He had practiced alone for years. He had poured every moment of loneliness, every sting of mockery, into the music that lived in his fingers. For the first time, he felt a surge of courage. Tonight, he would let the piano speak for him. The theater was packed. Parents, teachers, children, neighbors, all eager for entertainment, all ready to judge. Performances began. Singers hit the high notes effortlessly. Dancers twirled with perfect timing, and children with elegant instruments dazzled the audience. And then came Felix. He wheeled his piano onto the stage, its wheels squeaking against the floor, and the whispers began immediately. "Look at him. Does he even know how to play? That piano looks broken." He felt their eyes, piercing and full of doubt. He almost froze. Every instinct told him to run, to hide. But he took a deep breath and let his fingers hover above the keys. The theater fell into a tense quiet, broken only by the occasional snicker from the back row. Then, slowly, he pressed the first key. A single note rang out, soft and trembling, fragile like the boy himself. A few people laughed, shaking their heads. Felix's heart raced. His hands trembled. He remembered all the times he had been laughed at. Classmates calling him names, neighbors mocking his patched coat, teachers ignoring him. And yet, something inside him refused to give in. He pressed the next note. It was stronger, clearer. The sound began to flow, weaving through the theater like a gentle wind. Felix closed his eyes. The piano no longer felt like an object. It became an extension of his soul. Every key carried his story. The silent nights of practice, the rejection, the loneliness, the hope he had dared to hold on to. Slowly, the audience began to change. The laughter faded. People leaned forward in their seats, drawn in by the haunting beauty of the music. The boy in the front row, who had mocked him earlier, leaned back, startled, eyes wide. A teacher dabbed at the corner of her eye, unable to hide a tear. And then the girl in the first row, who had been watching quietly, gasped softly, mesmerized. Felix's fingers moved faster now, more confidently. He had prepared this piece for years, and finally, the piano sang exactly as he wanted. Every note was deliberate, every chord telling a story of struggle and perseverance. The room was silent, except for the sound of the piano and the collective heartbeat of the audience. They couldn't speak. They couldn't move. They could only listen. The music built and swelled, carrying everyone on its wave. Felix didn't look at the audience. He didn't need to. The piano spoke, and in that moment, it was louder than every doubt, every insult, every sneer he had endured. It was the invisible boy's voice, and it demanded to be heard. Then came the moment of suspense. Felix paused. The final sequence hung in the air. The theater waited, breaths caught. He lifted his hands slightly, then pressed the keys, and the last chords rang out, deep and perfect, echoing like a story's final words. For a beat, there was silence. The kind of silence that feels too heavy, too full of emotion to be broken. And then a single clap, another. Then the sound multiplied until the entire theater erupted in a standing ovation. People were on their feet, cheering, some crying quietly, some laughing in disbelief. Felix opened his eyes. He had done it. The boy nobody believed in, the boy everyone had dismissed, had turned doubt into awe, ridicule into admiration. He stood there for a moment, breathing heavily, letting the applause wash over him. The piano had been his secret weapon, his hidden talent, the thing that made him unforgettable. For the first time, he didn't feel invisible. For the first time, he knew he mattered. He had shown the world what he could do, not with words, but with music. The audience's cheers continued, a wave of emotion that filled the theater. Some were wiping tears, some were smiling, some were shaking their heads in disbelief. Even the boy who had mocked him earlier looked down, ashamed, yet moved. Felix smiled faintly. He had faced his fear, faced the laughter, and emerged victorious. He stepped away from the piano, letting it rest, and felt a warmth in his chest he had never known. Pride, yes, but also relief. Relief that years of quiet practice, of hidden tears and whispered notes, had led to this moment. He had been underestimated, laughed at, ignored. And yet, he had transformed all of that into something beautiful, something unforgettable. Felix had learned something powerful, that the greatest talent is often the one hidden from the world, the one nurtured in silence, the one that refuses to give up. And tonight, he had proven that even the smallest, quietest voice can resonate louder than the loudest mockery. The applause continued to echo, long after Felix stepped off the stage. He had started as a boy nobody believed in, and now he had become the boy everyone would remember. His piano had spoken for him, and for the first time, the world had listened. The applause still echoed in the theater as Felix stepped back, his hands trembling, heart still racing. He had played the notes he had practiced 1,000 times, but the final reaction had exceeded even his wildest dreams. For the first time, he felt seen not as a poor, invisible boy, but as someone who could make people stop, listen, and feel. Yet, as the clapping roared, he realized the journey wasn't over. There was one more moment, one final crescendo to truly prove what he was capable of. He leaned over the piano, closed his eyes, and let his fingers hover above the keys. This wasn't the practice piece he had prepared. This was something he had improvised in secret. Something raw, something that lived in his heart, but had never left his mind. He struck the first note, and it was unlike anything the audience had heard so far, deep, haunting, full of emotion. A hush fell over the theater. People leaned forward instinctively, as though even moving might break the spell. With every note, Felix's story unfolded. Each chord carried years of humiliation, every sneer he had endured, every day he had been ignored. The music was no longer just sound. It was a language speaking directly to the hearts of everyone in the room. The children who had laughed at him before sat frozen, mouths slightly open, unable to look away. The teachers who had doubted him exchanged glances, astonished. And the girl in the front row was crying softly, caught completely in the beauty of what she was witnessing. Felix's hands moved faster, yet the music never lost its clarity. Every note sang with perfect emotion, a delicate mix of sorrow, hope, and triumph. The piano, old and battered, became a bridge between him and the audience. They could feel the weight of every lonely evening he had spent practicing, the sting of every cruel comment, the hope that had never died inside him. The music wasn't just a performance. It was a revelation. Somewhere in the middle of the piece, Felix glanced up briefly, and the room looked different to him. The faces that had mocked, laughed, and doubted him were now full of wonder. He saw tears, smiles, even quiet gasps. The applause that had erupted before seemed small in comparison to this profound silence. They weren't clapping yet. They were listening, absorbing, feeling. Every person in the theater was witnessing not just his talent, but his soul. Then came the moment of ultimate suspense. Felix slowed, drawing out a single note, holding it, letting it hang in the air. The sound lingered, a fragile thread connecting him to everyone in the room. The audience leaned in, collectively holding their breath. No one moved. No one whispered. All that existed was the boy and the piano, and the music that had transformed the space into something almost sacred. And then, like a wave breaking on the shore, he struck the final chord. It was bold, brilliant, perfect. The note resonated, echoing in the theater, carrying every ounce of emotion he had poured into it. Silence followed for a heartbeat, long enough to feel infinite. And then eruption. The applause was thunderous, louder than anything the theater had ever heard. People stood, cheering, clapping, some crying, some laughing in disbelief. Felix's music had shattered every expectation, erased every doubt. He had not only silenced the laughter, but transformed it into admiration and awe. The boy who had been ignored, underestimated, and ridiculed had become unforgettable. Tears streamed down his face as Felix stood and bowed. He didn't care about the standing ovation, the cheers, or the applause. What mattered was that the music had spoken for him, had carried the voice he had hidden for so long. Every note had been a message. I am here. I matter. I have something to give. The audience continued to cheer, the energy in the theater almost tangible. People who had doubted him were now inspired, moved, humbled. The boy who had mocked him earlier approached quietly, eyes wide, and whispered a single word, amazing. Felix nodded, a small, shy smile on his lips. He didn't need more. The music had said everything. As he left the stage, the applause still echoing behind him, Felix realized that this was only the beginning. The piano had been his first voice, his first triumph, but it had unlocked something greater, belief in himself. He had faced the fear, the ridicule, the doubt, and emerged not broken, but stronger, braver, unstoppable. Later, walking through the quiet streets, Felix felt the city feel different. The cobblestones, the shadows, even the cold air seemed lighter. For years, he had moved through the world invisible, unheard. But now, he knew that no one could take away the truth of what he had done. Talent hidden in silence could be powerful, but talent revealed with courage could change everything. From that night on, Felix wasn't just a boy with a worn-out piano. He became a symbol for anyone who had ever been underestimated, laughed at, or told they weren't enough. His music traveled beyond the theater, beyond the town, touching hearts wherever it was heard. People began to understand that true talent doesn't always shine in the spotlight. It grows in quiet, unseen corners, waiting for the right moment to rise. And for Felix, that moment had come. He had turned every ounce of doubt into triumph, every whisper of ridicule into applause. The boy who had been ignored had shown the world what courage, perseverance, and pure passion could accomplish. He had faced the storm of laughter and fear, and he had emerged victorious, his music echoing like a beacon for all who had ever felt invisible. As the lights of the theater dimmed and the crowd slowly left, Felix sat by the piano, running his fingers across the keys. The sound was soft, tender, familiar. He smiled, knowing he had finally found his voice and that nothing could ever take it away. And in that quiet, magical moment, Felix understood the truth that would carry him forward forever. It wasn't about proving others wrong. It was about proving to himself that even the smallest, quietest voice can resonate louder than the loudest doubt. The piano had spoken, and the world had listened.